Very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And Mr. Boyd, I'm happy to be your congressman. And I'm happy to be, I love Mecklenburg County, yes, sir. And I don't think people realize the size of our district before I get started. We go from Fauquier County down to the North Carolina border. And if you talk about Mecklenburg County, it actually borders 4 counties and North Carolina, so it is huge. Number two, I almost laughed when somebody said NAFTA 2.0, because Mr. Boyd knows if we say NAFTA down in South Hill, or we say NAFTA in Lunenburg County, or we say NAFTA in Pittsylvania County, or Halifax County, or Franklin County, or Bedford County, or Campbell County, you'll get run out of town. So that's why I don't want to call it NAFTA 2.0, and you know that, sir. And so I'm glad you're here. I also got my aide here, so he's going to give you the card. So if you have any issues getting a meeting with anybody in the administration or with me, I'll go ahead. We'll try to make that happen, and I'll come see you on your farm. How does that sound? Yes, sir. So as we get started, I find it a little bit interesting because I know a little bit about farming in the 5th District of Virginia. After I was a CEO of a DOD company, as a lot of people know, I run a distillery. So, I deal with wheat, corn, barley, rye. We deal with a whole kind, everything you could possibly imagine when it comes to agricultural produce, spent mash. So I have a little bit of an interest in that, and plus I grow some of that on my own farm. I think the second thing that we have is that when I looked at the comparison between NAFTA and USMCA, and I looked at what it would create, I think it's pretty spectacular. And for me, when you look at Southside, and I think where me and Mr. Boyd probably are of like minds, we talk about a 3.6% unemployment rate in the United States. The 5th District's around 3%, but there's actually a 2 to 2.5% delta between the northern part of my district and the southern part of my district. Last was 2.4% unemployment in Fauquier County, which is 4 hours from you. And down around, you're talking about Danville or into Brunswick County, was as high as 4.7 to 5.2%. So there's a huge delta. Why? Because we've had problems with agriculture. The reason the USMCA is so important to me, and I'm going to go into something that I know a little bit about. Number one is here just are some of the US ITC's stats on this. USMCA would raise the U.S. real GDP by $68 billion, would create approximately 176,000 new jobs, directly related to 12 million jobs in the United States. It would increase exports to Canada and Mexico by $33.3 billion, and it would actually increase total U.S. agriculture and food exports by $2.2 billion. You're like, well, Denver, why is that so darn important? It's because my district is 65% rural. 65%. And by the way, it's over 10,000 square miles. So some of the other issues. Now, I had questions written out, so as you can see, I'm not looking at my questions too much right now because I know a little bit about this. And that's why I think right now when we talk about this, the same questions that everybody asked, they were going to ask you, I was going to ask you, how do we level the playing field against China, and how do we continue the economic boom that we've experienced over the last 2.5 years? Well, that's fantastic. It's fantastic for the first part of my district. Bottom part of my district, it's not so fantastic. There isn't an economic boom. And that's why the USMCA is so important to the 5th District. So I usually like to ask a lot of questions, as people know, and not try to take a lot of time. But there's one thing I want to talk about, and that's why I'm so happy everybody's here. We've talked about soybeans, big in my district, right? Certainly, right? We have talked about all kinds of issues. But in my district, you know what the big 3 are? So, not soybeans, not corn, not wheat, not rye. The big 3 are timber, believe it or not. The other one is dairy and tobacco. Right? So that's my issue. So let's talk about dairy and what the USMCA does for dairy. Fluid milk, 50,000 metric tons by year 6 of the agreement. And some of the other things, I'm going to skip the 47 things I have here, but there's something that's very, very important to my dairy farmers and the USMCA and everything that we're talking about. It's actually Class 6 and Class 7 when you're talking about actually the amount of milk and processed milk that we can actually bring into Canada. So my question here is this, and it's probably a pretty simple one. I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And if we're looking at farmers in my district, not only do we have to deal with China as soon as possible, we have got to get the USMCA passed. And a lot of that comes from me not being in politics very long. And also comes to see, I see the rising prices. And also when you talk about tariffs, you talk about steel and aluminum, I have to get aluminum totes. So really, I don't even want to ask you yes or no because you've already answered the question. But if anybody wants any of this last 30 seconds of their time to talk about the importance of USMCA or the perfect for the good, I'd like to hear it. And if not, I'm the last. As you can tell, I'm probably the last. But am I the last one? Is Cindy the last one? Am I the last one? Well, I just wanted to end easy for you all. So I wanted the USMCA. I wanted to pass. I thank you guys. Mr. Boyd, I'm going to be in touch with you, and we'll make sure it happens, whatever you need, because I represent you. Thank you, sir, and I yield back the whole 4 seconds of my time, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back.